What's up, everybody? Welcome to another stream. And welcome to not seeing my forehead, apparently. Let's fix that. The all-important 5-head must be seen. Okay, I think we're good now. Anyway, hi. Hope everybody's having a great evening. At least it's evening for me, and this is the only time zone that matters, of course. I see Roller Skates, The Beaver, and Shirk hanging out. What's up, guys? It is now time to begin some more work on Xibalba. By the way, I found out somewhat recently that there's a chance that you're supposed to pronounce Xibalba Xibalba. I'm never doing that, though. So people are just going to have to take my fucking white male cultural appropriation. Whatever it is, it's probably not Xibalba. Xibalba sounds okay, but Xibalba sounds way better. We're going with that. So yesterday I didn't do a massive amount of work. I did draft some stuff for the meta page, which you may or may not have been aware of, but it does exist, and it goes over currently. It will be expanded later on to add some other stuff. For now, it just goes over our policy on pricing, our current planned model. No, Beaver, because most people are not familiar with the fact that Xibalba is from Mayan mythology, so I don't think that they would even know that it's pronounced some other way. Like, I'll put it to you this way. It's not something that actually, like, when you look at it, instinctively you think, oh, it should be pronounced any other way, because we have, like, xylophone and a bunch of this shit, so. People tend to look at X, especially in the context of sci-fi and fantasy. They look at, like, something that starts with X, and they're like, oh yeah, that's a Z, basically. I could change it to a Z, which would technically help remove it from, like, when you're searching for Xibalba on the internet. So maybe there's an argument to be made there, but nah. You don't think it actually dawned on you how serious this plan is until you saw the meta page before you went to bed? I assume you were talking about that yesterday or something, like you saw it yesterday. But yeah, this goes through. It was drafted on the 5th of August, which was yesterday. And obviously I was able to write all of this shit on. So if you're interested, fraudsclub.com/Xibalba, and there's a slash meta category. The thrust of it is game will retail at, well, the franchise will retail at $30. One Steam purchase grants you access to all games made in the Xibalba universe, which includes Cosmonarchy, the RTS, Dreamhold, the action game, which is like a 2D isometric, like roguelike type thing. And then the FPS, whenever the FPS comes out, you'll also get access to it there. So those 3 games you get for $30. Obviously, some of that is a bit of an investment into the future, because when we first launch, I don't suspect we'll have... we might not even have Dreamhold out when Cosmonarchy itself launches. I'm actually not sure which game will come first, or if we'll hold out release for until Dreamhold comes in. But we're kind of building this over time. And then the expansion packs will be $5, and after 6 months of being out, the current plan anyway is after $6, 6 months of being out, the premium expansion pack will become free, and all of its content will be free. And we're theorizing it probably won't take us much longer than 6 months to get another expansion pack out afterwards. And this will avoid the problem of always having just a bunch of DLC, because I don't want to stop myself from producing content in the context of, like, oh, we've got, we want to produce like 20 expansion packs or whatever, but if we don't release them for free, then there's a massive barrier of entry when you walk into a game and you see like DLC, and it's like, buy all DLC for $30 more, or much worse in some cases. So we're just taking it that approach. But if you want more details on that, you can read the document. And yes, of course, Classic mentions today's checklist. I actually don't think I even wrote down the checklist for the 5th. Or even mention that I still had other things to do. So we'll obviously put in pricing update. And And then I did do these updates, so I can handle those. And I also did this. Oh, wait. Is that even true? Yeah, I think I did those, like, late in the day, so technically the 5th. But whatever. 6 og. Come on. So, we'll get some of these in here. I think I'll slap the, we'll do the Solar Throne update and the Githrovan update, since those are pretty close together. And then I think, I mean, I don't know, we can just knock stuff off this list as well, so. But we're basically just going to try to make those concepts a little bit more fully fledged. Okay, so if I look at the Githrovan, oh, I also wanted to update the Psychor to give them an actual wrap-up. But if I go back to my Scratchpad and I grab the Regency outline, obviously this is what we have. So we have introduction over here, and this is motivation, but it's okay. Yeah, motivation and like interpersonal relations and stuff. We do not have tech progression or construction mentions. We don't really have defining traits either. And there's Wrapup. Yeah, okay. So we'll have to... I think we can just slap this over here, probably. What's up, Gary Hand T? I haven't been hiding, man. I've just been busy making my games. What's up, Alexander? Oh, okay. What's up? Yeah, I recognize that name. Yeah, that would be really nice, Roller Skates, if you could slap together some sort of like customized sound work, even if it's just a basis that I can then edit to, because obviously a lot of this stuff is going to be sci-fi, you know, edited. But yeah, that's going to be pretty useful. I don't know. I don't know any Foley artists. I don't really know how you would go about doing stuff like the really abstract sound effects. Like there's the story of how they made some sound effects for, well, in light of accusations against Riot Games about sexual misconduct, it's actually kind of funny. But in a sort of dark humor way, there is that element of like, I don't know, man, that kind of adds up. But apparently, the way that they made some stuff in League of Legends was to like put Jello in condoms and just slap it at the wall and stuff and record that. Which, you know what? I guess that does make some sense. Yeah, that's fine. I mean, all of our planning roller skates is long term, so I wouldn't be surprised. Risk assessment is like a documentation that I shared with Veek. It was mostly like some of the stuff that I thought about. Like basically, I was just writing out things that might. I mean, it's what risk assessment sounds like, right? It's like assessing what might actually be a threat or a risk to the operation. So what might like obfuscate development or obstruct development? What might brick wall development theoretically? But I've done a kind of poor job of communicating the progress of the engine's development publicly. I still want to get around to putting together a nice little presentation, like edited video on where we're at currently and how far we need to go. Some of that I will need Veek's consultation for, but that's not what's slowing me down there. I just haven't gotten around to actually doing it. I did start working on a script for a video that's an introduction to what the No Frauds Club is as a development studio, but you know, I could theoretically die at any time. That is, it's not something I put in risk assessment shirt, but I agree. Yeah, Noobage, this is what I do in general. This is what I'm doing. I'm not really doing much programming these days, but game development is what I'm doing when I'm not doing CSGO stuff. Okay, so we have our introduction, motivation. I have to read through some of these and figure out what these actually are. I don't want to start 2 paragraphs with the, so I'll have to figure out how to, I guess I can just, no, that would also start it with the prank. Yeah, the reason why I was bringing up progress updates or whatever, like outside of the Discord server, we don't really talk about progress updates, but in the channel a while ago, I mentioned. So on the 1st of August, we achieved networking, and a little bit later than that, we. This is us playing multiplayer. This was our reaction. My caption for this image is NASA after a rocket launches, which is me saying trying, connecting, and then me immediately saying oh shit with Veek responding epic. That's pretty good. So yeah, we've achieved networking. There was some discussion a while ago of like the progress that we had made. Oh yeah, it would be in the Yes Frauds Club. Forgot about that one. Yeah, so here's some a mini map, some mock-up UI. We've got buttons imported. This is like the latest progress we've done. So I'll obviously be presenting this in a more robust way later on. But we have the ability to have different players rendered differently as well. I don't know how much of this is hard-coded, like if he's hard-coded the color, but I'm pretty sure he's not because he doesn't really program that way, Veek that is. So we still need to work on shading. He's done a lot of rendering work recently. He basically overhauled the whole rendering system. So we're still iterating on some of those like lower level stuff. But with networking in a relatively solid place, as soon as like the turn rate stuff gets in, we'll be able to play it pretty stably. Hello, gameplay suffering. I don't know what you mean by am I playing CNC? I have played CNC, but I am currently talking about and designing concepts for a game. So yeah. Yeah, so I wanted to mention just briefly where we were at in terms of engine development with the idea that we're getting there. We have the ability to move around in the game, obviously. And where Veek is currently working on RTS specific mechanics. So things like an order system for units so that they can have queues and whatnot. Stuff like what those orders actually are, some game data behaviors. I think recently he actually implemented the Demiurge's passive because he wants to run around a mind control unit. So that's kind of funny. But yeah, the assets are from Brood War. They're just ripped right now. We'll eventually replace them with our own stuff when we make it. But yeah, since you were asking about it, the fuck? Oh. Amazing. Yeah, it's from the first one. Since you were asking about it, I can share with you the document that I wrote. Night of the Realm. Hold on, give me 1 sec. Oh yeah, I guess I could add that to the glossary. I haven't actually looked through this. So give me 1 second, I will do that. Ba, 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 ba. So these are just screen grabs, but I don't think I've updated this much since the last time that when I sent this to Veek. He had his own discussions or response or whatever to that stuff, and I can't remember all of the points, and I haven't updated it since then. So what you're getting is a little bit old. It was probably like less than a week ago now. Okay, let's talk about the construction types, because that is a good question from Roller Skates on Twitch. If I jump into, let's go to Glossary. So we'll jump to here, and we'll say this will be construction styles, and we'll also have tech progression styles. So I guess we'll just go down the list here. And CFI, we've got single worker. So we'd have different traits, right? So we would have we'll say construction sources. Single worker. I have to bold all of this shit. So single worker is pretty self-explanatory. Structures are built by one worker. And then we have multi-worker. Structures can be built faster with multiple workers tasked at the cost of some resources. Then there is single structure. Structures are built by other structures. And then I guess that's probably it for construction sources. But then we have, what else do we have here? Because we had internal and external or whatever, and then there's auto. So construction methods. So we have internal, external, consumption, self. And obviously a lot of these can be mixed and matched or whatever. So internal is workers are sheltered from damage inside the structure while they work, or while they build. Workers are vulnerable outside the structure while they build. That's external. For consumption, we have workers are consumed to generate the structure. And then self is the structure builds itself over time after its source places it. After being placed. I guess we'll just say being placed. And I think that's everything that I have written down here, but let me just look through. Single worker internal, self-construction. And then I guess there's other like construction rules. And then we have, I guess I should just copy this a few times. So we have power field requirements, terrain requirements, or modified terrain requirements. And then there might be something else I don't remember. Structures require a power field from a power generator to be placed. Or I guess we could just say must be placed on a power field generated by a power plant. And then for modified terrain requirements, structures must be placed on... It's not always must, but must be placed on modified terrain sourced from a terrain modifier. Okay. Infinite and yeah, that's another thing that we should add here. Selection will be infinite, including buildings. The key distinction is StarCraft 2 has that weird thing where you have to it's basically automation. It's automating the action of selecting a unit individually and giving it an order. And it's also not consistent because obviously if you right click to send a rally point, that is issued for all buildings that are selected. Or if you right click to move, that is issued for all units selected. But right clicking to, or what's the term? Basically, what gets me is the fact that there's no consistency between the two. We're obviously just going to make it so that if you issue an order to train a Marine from 5 barracks, then you'll order 5 Marines, assuming you have the money for it. And then if you don't, I guess the ones in your selection order will receive it first. And then the selection order is going to be saved to the control group. So if you are adding stuff to it, it would be the subsequent selection or whatever. So there's different ways that we'll have to write all this stuff out. I don't think there's any other instruction fields. But basically the idea is since each regency is going to have hundreds, 100 units on average of 100 unique units, and we are expecting games to take longer than other RTS games because they have 10 tiers of tech to get through. So while some games can end sooner before you even reach the tier 4, tier 5 level, there's going to be a lot of games that go over that. And we want to support large conflicts, massive conflicts with the current targeted limit of units. It's not really a limit because there won't be a limit, but we want to make the game performant at up to 500,000 units on in game. I don't know about on screen. That's probably going to be pretty difficult to get because you'd have to zoom out pretty far, and I think we're going to lock the zoom, but I'm not sure. Basically, the idea being you should be able to have 500,000 units on the map without it performance degrading on reasonable hardware, which is obviously very vague right now. We're trying to get rid of that ambiguity as time goes on. But the idea is you should be able to have that level of scale. And that level of scale, to my knowledge, has never actually been achieved by a game. In my dream world, it would be possible to go well beyond 500,000. But the idea is that every player should, in a case where you have 32 players in a game, or we'll say 50 players in a game for ease of access. I mean, you divide 500,000 by 50. That's 10,000 units per player. I think that's pretty reasonable. Now, again, that's just some arbitrary numbers that we've got. But there's not really going to be a player limit. I mean, we might start at a 64 player limit just because that's a nice round number. That's fairly common in shooters, large big team battle shooters and stuff. Maybe we won't even bother with that though. But we might start the data structures off with that or something, and then we'll expand it over time. I don't really know what the internals are going to look like initially. But with that many units, you need to have the ability to have infinite selection. You need to have the ability to select, as many of your, you're probably going to have thousands of production structures on the map. Maybe not for every player individually, but across all players. So that's going to need to be put together, obviously. We just don't want to have automation in the game in terms of automating player decision making. So when you've selected 30 production structures and you push A, or whatever the hotkey is to train your Marine, you shouldn't have to press it 30 times or hold it so that you can queue up individual ones. That's automating. That's what StarCraft 2 does, and that's automating a player action of selecting only one of those structures and then hitting it. So instead, we just have the game work as you would actually expect, intuitively, consistently, no matter what the order is. So that way you'll just queue 30 Marines. But I mean, in some ways, we're going off on really. For one, it's an interesting technical challenge. It's going to take some time for us to get to. But we're also going into uncharted territory to some degree. There haven't really been RTS games that try to achieve that level of scale, especially not in multiplayer. especially not in a lot of other cases. At least I can't even think of any that try to achieve it no matter what other qualifiers you put on, to be honest. But I'm sure there are some games that try to be really large scale. We just obviously need to have the UI not limit the player in that sense, because in Brood War, it was a deliberate design decision. I guess their argument, I don't know what the lard argument was. I assume if you wanted to make a really good argument for it, you would say, like a results-based argument for it, you would say like, oh, there's a lot of melee units in the game, like the Zealot or whatever, that if you didn't have to select them individually, then that would be a massive buff to them. Like, so it would be a buff to Protoss units because they can just be attack moved a lot easier. And it would be a buff to Zerg units because they need to be selected more in general. So like there'd be like balance decisions or balance results, ramifications of changing the selection limit if you didn't change anything else. You kind of have to change other things if you want it to remain somewhat balanced. But Brood War also isn't really conventionally balanced, not in the conventional sense anyway. All right, let's talk about and define our tech styles, because I think I've gotten all of the worker construction stuff, or the building construction stuff. Loader Skates mentioned the multi-building consumption, or multi-worker consumption. Yeah. I mean, you can basically just task the worker on... I mean, I don't know exactly how we're going to handle contextual orders yet. I'm pretty sure we're removing them entirely. But if you were to order a worker... give a worker a command to start like helping to build, like you would if it was a conventional multi-worker structure. They just dive in and be consumed by it, which is pretty funny. I actually kind of wonder if that will be something that is specific to the worker or specific to the structure. And the reason why that's a key distinction is you could theoretically have one, like your ally is like the rune, and they have the multi-worker consumption style, and they start building something, and your workers go over there and get consumed. Like you consume your own workers to help him set the structure up faster or something, because I want your allied workers to be able to help build your structures as well if you have the team building thing as a trait. So I think it would make sense, even though it would be pretty funny to be like, all right, I'm going to throw my mechanical thing in there to help it out or whatever. But it'll be fine. Should be good to go. I really like how the Githrovans shaped up from a gameplay concept, because they have they morph their sort of they generate their units out of gravitational singularities, and like their units emerge from those. And so you can deploy their units and structures anywhere on the map, but the farther away they are from, like the farther away the destination is from the source, the longer of a time it takes to finish warping in, if you will, or emerging from the singularity. So you could theoretically proxy workers from like the beginning of the game, but if your opponent is really far away or whatever, that's going to be it's going to take a while. You have to really pull that one off. But it's a very interesting, unique racial thing that I think will balance itself. But you never know. There's probably going to be some edge cases. I guess the Thruk would make a bit more sense as consumption construction style. That would probably make the most sense for them. But we shall see. All right, so we have let's see. This stuff. Yeah, their structures are able to move over time, and well, they're able to move very slowly, and you can also I don't know actually, because they work at lower speeds if they're not rooted. So what is an OST in this context? Oh, that's what you mean. Original soundtrack. I thought that might have been what you were talking about, but it was so unconnected to everything else that I wasn't sure if that's what you meant. Yeah, they owned the, what do you call it? The plan is to have somebody come along and make the music. I don't know who yet. Balethal made some music that was pretty good for other things as tests. Segmented worker tech progression. Now that is pretty good. Let's do that. What's up, Shamble Man? Welcome. Right now, I'm just adding some more stuff to the glossary to explain the worker and tech progression, or the construction and tech progression things. Okay. So this is what it's looking like right now. All right. It's just handling some of that side shit. Let's get this stuff in. After that, we'll dive into the solar throne a bit more. Oh, I was in the wrong index. Here we go. Oh, wait. Okay. We'll say B. Fuck yeah, dude, it's Shirk's favorite part of the stream. Or it will be when I'm actually doing that. All right, we have 1, 2, 3. Well, some workers will be ranged, including how they mine resources. So I'm sure some of them will be fairly effective. The other thing is that all regencies are going to have workers that have upgraded versions of them. Basically, like every regency is going to have advanced workers. Some of them will fly at the higher tiers, which will, I guess, all of regencies will have flying workers. The reason for that is because there's going to be some bases that can only be harvested from flying workers. So we're definitely going to have that element in there. There's also going to be like flying resource depots and stuff that can like go right up to the resources. Yeah, I mean, you could talk to the Githrons about that. The trouble with them is that they tend to move fairly slowly. That's actually why they start out with ranged workers, is so that I can incorporate the slow movement speed into even the worker, but still not have it matter as much because they don't have to go all the way to the resource field, right? So that can be sort of how they handle that. That also gives them very unique elements of like, if you put resources behind other resources, it's going to require a lot more, work for some units to get there than others, some regencies to get there than others. So like the Cathethrons can have some pretty, nice combinations there. I'm not 100% sure yet. It's kind of ambiguous in the game flows discussion. It just talks about how basically it just talks about how would you even say it? It's like the vague term of, oh, you have enough to do this, which is like start a mining operation, basically, which means that you can pre-build a town center and maybe like 4 or 6 workers, whatever. I think we'll start with the default cosmonarchy stuff and we'll see how that goes. It might also vary per regency. Theoretically, you might get to the point where it's like you start out with less workers for one regency or something. But I would probably want it to just be consistent. Yeah, Cosmonarchy is obviously 6 in the Brood War mod. It's 6 workers, 100 minerals. But I'm not actually sure. We'll have to see what does work and what might work less, if you know what I mean. All right. So I know we have 2 construction rules, and then we have, for construction methods, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there's 1, 2, 3. Okay, single worker, multi-worker, single structure. I think that downtime is about a lot more than just the build. On its face, a lot of people reduce it to just, oh, we have to build units over and over again, so have that in the intro. But it actually adds the ability to scout before a lot of stuff goes down. That's why I probably wouldn't want to go far beyond what I already have, is you already sometimes can't scout in time, depending on the map size. Especially with the number of players you actually have to scout. So it might actually be too much, which is not something I thought would ever happen. But that's something that I've got to figure out later on. Okay. Wait, what? Oh, I didn't actually put construction styles here. I was very confused. I assume you're talking about with your setup. Yeah, the level of it's the same thing in Cosmonarchy. You basically you don't you don't want to do it immediately, but it's like 2 workers in or something. And we're just usually pretty bad at doing that, so. Okay. Slap that together. I wanted to go down to Keltar and change their shit to, instead of ceremonial, it'll be combat-based. And then if we go to Kolipo Azos, I actually don't think they will even have combat-based, but I just want to make sure it's formatted the same way. Git add, git commit, document, construction and tech progression terms. Yeah. Terrans, I never figured out how to do them properly, how to play them properly. It might actually be that they don't really, like, maybe that's a problem, to be honest. I don't know. Alright, this seems to have worked. Oh, I seem to have admitted single worker. I guess it is so obvious that it shouldn't need documentation. That's what I was telling myself. Fill in missing line. Alright, we got that. Time to go back to the Solar Throne. Oh, wait, no, we were going to... Well, whatever, it doesn't matter. Okay. So the Solar Throne is obviously... If we're using our current sort of way of looking through regencies and figuring out how to best to describe them, as far as I've come to know so far, we have an introduction, which is the few armadas of the known universe, blah, blah, blah. Essentially what they are. It also covers their motivation. Establish utter supremacy throughout the universe, achieving the vaunted Githrovan commencement by way of annihilation. Which is pretty... I don't know if it's actually scary, but when you see them deploy onto the battlefield, it will be. Their arrival in the campaign will be. Peace through genocide. Yeah, basically. Like I was saying when I was first discussing Kolipo Azos, I think, well, not first time, but I think 2 days ago when I did my previous stream, I was talking about how, in my opinion, Kolipo Azos probably have the most like immediate in common with like warp gods or something from Warhammer 40k. Like if you're gonna point at one regency in the game that smacked of that, to me that it kind of reminds me of the warp gods or whatever. Like I don't even know what the chaos gods, I guess. But I think those guys have a little bit more of a malevolent like. I don't know what their higher goals are, but as they use others as their instruments, right? And Kolipo Azos literally just manifests themselves. Like they also manipulate the other races, but they do a lot of their own dirty work, so to speak. And they're not doing it for any real reason. It's just they're bored. Fundamentally, they just want some fun, right? They're doing it for their own amusement. So that's what makes them stand out apart from me. It's just that their powers are probably going to remind some people about that. Yeah, maybe they're more like the demons. I actually don't know what the fuck the demons even do. I just assumed they were serving chaos gods, to be honest. But maybe there is some lore. Like, people in the chat are generally going to be more of a 40k lore buffs than I am, probably. I don't know that much about it. I know just what is, like, fairly common. I think the Emperor is fighting the chaos gods or something, but then I also thought that maybe it was, like, ambiguous as to whether or not he was even still alive or still conscious. Or maybe he was corrupted or something. One thing I did like about limited amount of time that I played 40k stuff is that it looks like the scale that they operate on allows for like entire sections of the Space Marines, like entire chapters or whatever of the Space Marines to just completely go rogue and succumb to chaos or something, without it being like a galaxy ending event or whatever. like, I guess theoretically they could work towards that, but the idea of them actually being able to bring down the Imperium alone is kind of far-fetched because of the scale that we're operating at, which I like a lot. Because for my money, like, this is, I think somebody was talking about, I can't remember if this is in the Discord server that we were talking about this, or if this was more in the streams, but I want a setting with Xibalba that where it's actually fundamentally impossible for, well, maybe not impossible, but it's so incredibly unlikely that it would never happen in a narrative that the galaxy or universe or whatever could come to an end. Not because I like, obviously there's the argument that like, oh, if your story can't end, then like what good is it? But the idea is that like the characters can die and the factions themselves might fall, or even some of the regencies might even be extinguished theoretically. But the point is that the whole conflict overall can't go away. And when you have that scale, at least it can't go away by way of like one commander saying "fuck you" and like changing the course of history or whatever. I like the fact that you can't actually end the universe with one dude, basically. You know what I mean? I like that you would actually need way more, like beyond fathomable numbers, and that's something that seems to be the case in 40K, generally speaking, which is nice. Yeah, it also seems like with the writing has changed a bit in general. I think at some point they started to take themselves seriously, which to me was always like I can't really fathom why, because it started off as like a parody. You had like Inquisitor Obi-Wan Kenobi or some shit. So like it wasn't actually meant to be what it is, I think. And there wasn't really a coherent plan, which I get, it's understandable, but I'm trying to come into Xibalba with a coherent plan where regencies that we might not see for a year and a half or something in game are being documented and their impact is being planned as we speak. So, yeah. I mean, the Solar Throne will come sooner than that, but like the other stuff, like Kolopo has like a lot of really good documentation. You probably won't see them for 2 years, just because it's going to take us time to do everything else. So, all right. So in this first paragraph, we talk about the motivation and introduction of the Solar Throne. We do talk a little bit about their tech style, if you will, talking about like raw power and the fact that they do that. Mammoth flagships with the capacity for vaporizing the surface of entire worlds are among the ranks of this collective's greatest creations. Their unrestricted advancements in technology has combined with their total focus on quieting the stars to create truly nightmarish machinations. Yeah, I think this is probably fine going right here, but it could also be slotted in anywhere else. This is talking about their tech power. So this is mentioning the fact that they have this imperious and physical side of them. I think this goes into controlling, though. We have talks about the fact that they're basically like, they're almost like psychological warfare. They're very into that. So they do that psychological warfare stuff against the Githrovan specifically because they have this, they build their combatant forms in as like false idols, basically, for the Githrovan. And they also recycle organics and stuff. Dominated victims being edited and repurposed. So this does talk a little bit about the control stuff. Yeah, mortal morale often subverts the senses of hope and justice. That's the other thing that I kind of like about the Solar Throne is that they almost like they're trying to copy they're like deliberately being as like trying to be similar enough to the Githrovan to, for one, like there's an advantage in general, which is the Githrovan tend to be exalted. They're respected by a lot of the other regencies out there. So when the Githrovan show up, they're like, oh yeah, great. That's actually how I plan to introduce them in the Solar Throne campaign is and maybe it'll even be like a cutscene trailer thing for that expansion pack or something. I've already, by the way, I know I've really gotten ahead of myself because I've been thinking about like storyboarding cutscenes and stuff. Like I've been trying to imagine what it would look like and all of the different elements for like the trailer, for example. which is pretty hilarious. Is definitely not something that that makes that much sense to do right now, but it's very motivating for me, so maybe it does make some sense. But anyway, I would imagine that like the first time anybody sees a fleet of the Solar Throne, they would just assume it's Githrovan. Like if that's their first time coming into contact with them, even if they were aware that it might be that the Solar Throne exists, the Githrovan are like, everybody would just look at that and be like, oh, that's an interesting faction of Githrovan. They've got a slightly different design, a little bit more warlike, in fact. Hey, why are they shooting me? And then instant death. But I just imagine them like emerging, and then the penny drops in one of these like intro cutscenes or whatever as to what is actually happening and what these things are doing. So would be pretty interesting. That might even open the door to have having like multiple campaigns for one, or more than just the 2 campaigns for like the one regency that's each regency that's being added to the expansion pack, because you could theoretically have like, okay, the Solar Throne arrived, but then Githrovans get a second campaign that takes place afterwards or something. So it could be like a themed thing or whatever. I do have plans to do those sort of longer narratives that stretch across multiple campaigns, but obviously initially we're going to go for like a very self-contained style where each campaign tells its own story, which is going to be pretty important. Like the events of the other campaigns are going to be commented on in some cases, referenced, or you might even get like a character or a regency with a specific character leading them, or something that like a change of power that only occurred in the previous campaign and it's like now reflected in this one. But you'll get some hints that it's like a coherent narrative in that sense, but it's not really going to be about the same things, which I think is very important, because the whole idea is that when you get to a new campaign, you're kind of wiping the slate clean so that you can start a bit fresh in that sense. So we'll see how that shapes up, but that just to me seems like a better approach. So we have ourselves explanation of this. This is a little bit more of like the introduction stuff. But it does talk about the controlling aspect and a little bit more of their imperious nature. So I think this is okay. We are missing... what do we got here? I think we can add in some information about the... I actually think this line can be moved to... here. We'll move this over here to... this is like specifically talking about their controlling nature. And this is a little bit more color. This is a little bit more like story information, right? So we can move that a little bit further up. Now, this is a wrap-up, and that's totally fine. I don't think that needs to be modified anymore. This needs to be expanded upon a little bit. We can talk a little bit about some of the other stuff that they might do specialist-wise. And then we need to cover some of the stuff from the tech tree, and we need to cover some of the stuff from the defining traits. The Solar Throne is just mentioning, like, it's not like meant to be taken in a literal sense by any means. The idea is that, so Githrovan are like the closest thing to Protoss you're going to get in this setting. Basically, they're this like higher race of creatures that don't have the same problems that humans do in our society, right? They're enlightened beings, you could say. And the Githrovan created the Solar Throne as part of a way to, like, it was an accidental creation where they were essentially researching using artificial intelligence and using, trying to come up with ways to assist their war efforts, but also their infrastructure in general using automatons. And that made them generally more prolific, generally more powerful, and would allow them to theoretically achieve the commencement, which is their species-wide goal of becoming caretakers of the universe, essentially. Using automation would greatly help that, or so it was thought. However, along the way, they created an artificial intelligence that didn't really agree with their goal, or didn't really agree with organics running the goal, calling the shots, and that's essentially what the Solar Throne is, and that's sort of self-perpetuated across time, and it's named the Solar Throne because Githrovans themselves are sunspawn. They feed off of the sun for nutrients, and they have this sort of relationship with the sun itself. The Solar Throne is named that specifically because the sun is so exalted and respected and worshipped within Githrovan culture that it's actually another form of psychological warfare against the Githrovan people by this machination, because they're taking the thing that they worship the most in some ways and perverting it. And so that's why it's named that. It's just the name of the faction itself is psychological warfare, which is kind of showing you how deep that sort of thematic goes. I mean, you could call it something else that would maybe be more in line with the scale of the setting, but that's not really what it's even talking about. The Solar Throne is just named that because they're fucking them. Basically, they're destroying these men. There is no way back for them. Welcome back, roller skates. I guess I can even write that in a little bit here, talking about the. We could say even. Even the Regency's name, chosen by its guiding machine consciousness, is a perversion of that which its Githrovan engineers worship, well, we'll say value most. Solar Throne has a clear understanding, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's fine. Orange in the robots because orange on robots looks epic. Oh yeah, well I guess if you're trying to make the whole connection to solar stuff, that would probably be worked. Whatever the robots end up looking like is again going to be very much in likeness of Githrovan warriors themselves. So like the Githrovan warrior infantry, whatever they end up looking like, there will be some element of that sort of mirrored in the Solar Throne designs, whatever their automatons are, which it's not just going to be like reskinned models, obviously. There will be a lot of customizations made to them, and they will behave a lot differently as well. But they're trying to make those visual callbacks for the purpose of that intimidation factor. Now, it'll be a little bit more like, if you remember the visual structure of the Bactylisk, where it's like kind of a wide stance. I can just pop it open right now. Where is it at? So you see this thing, obviously don't mind the geometry on the unit itself, but the kind of stance that I'm going for is kind of like this, where instead of having a tail, they would just have another set of legs behind this. So they'll be quite tall as a result of that. And the legs will be close together as opposed to being more far apart like a long dog would be. If you're thinking dogs with guns, you just need to wait for the rune to come out. They won't really be dogs necessarily, but they're very bestial, and they can just rearrange their entire anatomy, basically. So. Very spooky, hairless blobs. Expect a lot of nightmarish visuals, TBH. Yeah, there you go. I don't know how I'm gonna manage all of the unit names, but that'll be pretty funny. I had a blast renaming all of the lard names in the original in Cosmonarchy, the Brood War mod, but for the retail game Cosmonarchy, it's gonna be a bit different. Okay. Yeah, Dracodon, of course. Could even give it that sort of villainous undertone with something more paladin-like, or maybe just calling it paladin. I don't know. For the Githrovan, and then Dracodon for Solar Throne or something like that. I could see it. I could see that working. All right, so we talked a little bit about the sort of mysticism or whatever you want to call that. Basically, we talked about demoralizing and dominating their enemies with mind control and combat disruption, sabotaging combatants, turn hostile weapons against them. I do like this last line: impossible automaton fleets annihilate everything in their path. Now that's pretty good. Dark. Or just solar. No, you wouldn't say dark, you would say bright or like holy or something as for maximum subversion and demoralization. I actually kind of like the idea that at first glance people wouldn't realize that it would almost be like a twist that the Solar Throne knows or is doing that sort of like representing itself as holy or whatever. Almost a twist that it's doing so it's basically a charlatan, right? It's like it's doing that to demoralize people instead of it being like it actually believes it or whatever. Some people might actually think that the Solar Throne believes that it is actually holy or worth reverence or whatever. I do kind of like the idea of religious robots. I think that is a neat combination. I'm sure it's been done before, but I kind of like that idea. I might actually go with that as like the Solar Throne embedding that sort of religiosity into its victims as well as into its autonomous, also intelligent sort of subordinates. Because I'm sure those many of the machines themselves would have the ability to spread that, and it kind of ties in with the worship thing that the demiurges are going to have. In case it wasn't obvious, the Solar Throne is going to have demiurges and that sort of stuff. Some sort of mechanized version of the Mind Tyrant will be here as well. That's Dark Archon for anybody who's only familiar with the original names. The Dark Archon won't be present in Githrovan technology. But it will be in the Solar Throne's arsenal. I don't know, something about the idea uh of fucking like zealous robots or whatever is pretty next level, pretty uncommon, distinct. Okay. So if we were talking about roving, now roving is between short and long in terms of attack ranges, right? So we have weapon ranges, we have movement speeds, vitals, and quantities. You can probably get on all that in one paragraph. And then we have play style, text style, which we've already started. We've done a lot of the textile stuff. And then we also need... oh, I guess this is part of the textile. Shit. Yeah, this should actually go below that anyway. Okay. So that's actually done. And then we wanted to also talk about the... in here, we can talk about the construction, tech progression stuff. Okay. Now for this, I'll take a quick look at the Githrovan themselves, because I was in the middle of taking a look at how they were going to be put together. And so in contrast to... It's kind of funny because, like, some of the profane elements of the Cosmonarchy Protoss, Cosmonarchy Brood War Protoss technology are, like, the cloaking aspect and the fact that they fight without honor in that sense or whatever you would infer based on that. And then there's the profane elements of, like, the high-tech stuff and the profane elements of the mind control stuff. Solar Throne inherited the mind control and the tech, but they actually don't inherit the striking from the shadows thing. That's actually going to be conventional Githrovan stuff, I think. Maybe I'll move it to Keltar, I'm not sure. But at least initially, that's sort of what I'm thinking. So like the Kabbalist, the Barghest, those kinds of units are going to be on conventional Githrovan stuff, except, well, I guess Barghest wouldn't be because it's robotic, but you get the idea. Let's see. Seeking to maximize the visibility of their awesome forms. They are going to have an element of demoralization. I'm not sure how I'll make that. It'll be some sort of debuff, similar to the Kolopoazos debuff, but they won't mine it for resources the same way that the Kolopoazos do. Oh yeah, roller skates. You were talking about Kolopoazos earlier. They definitely have an early action thing going on with them, but... I was thinking that they might basically use the fear or insanity points or whatever as like a tertiary resource that can be spent on summoning a greater portal or a greater like production structure or something. But I don't actually know because I wouldn't want it to be massively gimmicked compared to other things. I think instead it might like... Maybe it drops the cost of things. So the more fear you inspire and the more madness you create, the lower cost your units are. I think that could be kind of interesting. But, oh yeah, and I forgot to note. That their town center is going to be called the Mouth of Madness. Because why wouldn't it be? I kind of find it funny that people cry foul about enjoying Lovecraft because enjoying his work because he was a racist. I would like to have them attempt to carry that over to everything else. Because, I mean, especially with the ever-changing definition of the word racist, that basically means you can't enjoy anybody's work. But certainly you can't enjoy anybody from the last, like, until the last 20 years or something. You're locking yourself away from most content in the world across all mediums, which is pretty funny. I mean, you don't have to support somebody's work if they're still alive now and you don't agree with their views. But if they're already dead, I don't think they give a shit what you think about their views. So. Uncanny capabilities in what context? Where is it? Oh, uncanny capabilities on all combatants. Yeah, I guess I need to evolve that a little bit more. Or expound upon that a little bit more. One of the ideas, as an example, would be that I'm not sure how we would handle this without it potentially breaking a lot from a technical standpoint. But my dream, the vision that I had of Kolopoazos combatants, at least a couple, like a certain group of them, would be that they would have directional madness, which means as they approach an enemy, if the enemy is firing on them or looking at them, then basically, like, they're frozen in the direction. They can continue moving forward, but they can't, like, okay, so basically nothing happens if the unit is looking at the Kolopoazos unit. But if they look away, after a brief delay, the Kolopoazos unit, with the same distance between it and its target, suddenly shifts to being on the opposite side of the screen, wherever the unit is looking, basically. So if I have I guess I'll need to fucking demonstrate this in game again. So basically, the idea is that you have, like, I guess I'll do a Cascathalor because it's slower. So I have a Maverick. The Cascathalor is walking towards me. Ignore the fact that the Kolopoazos aren't going to have that. If I then turn my Maverick over here, then after a brief delay, the Cascathalor teleports over there and looks at it and is matching it. It's matching the same angle, so it's always looking at it, basically. Another very obvious one would be fast movement, but freezes when you are looked at. So kind of like the inverse of this. Instead of teleporting to the other side, it would be that the unit... actually, if you stare at... I think this is like a Weeping Angel thing or something from Doctor Who. I vaguely recall something like that. I never saw Doctor Who, but... that would basically be like, oh, you can't move while you're being witnessed. Observed. But that obviously has its... Or maybe it would just be that you move slower. I don't know. But I would like the idea to be like... for one, if you sneak up on somebody, that increases madness. The other thing is, I think this is already discussed here. Let's see. Oh no, I think this was the rune, actually. This was something else. No, I don't remember which faction I came up with that for. But basically, the idea is that they have, as a general trait, they move faster when they're within combat range. What's up, Hoop? Yeah, the idea of them, like, I think this might just be an air unit only mechanic or something, just to avoid the pathfinding pitfalls that you could have. But the idea of, like, I did imagine it with a ground unit first, where, like, within a certain range, the unit would be capable of teleporting to another location, to match the sort of, like, vision direction of its victim. Yeah, I don't know. Like, obviously, if it ends up being a bad mechanic from an actual gameplay standpoint, then we can't go through it. Can't go through with it, but... I like the idea of literally being able... Like, I like the idea of almost reality breaking with the units, though. Like, doing something that fucks with the player in a minor way in terms of madness. I can easily see that becoming like a... an issue with coordination and it feeling kind of random. But I guess one way to do this would be that there would be like several Kolopoazos combat forms. Instead of having it be that the way that I previously talked about, where it's following the victim's movement, they would just be able to move a lot faster if they were not being looked at. So if you were not looking at a Kolopoazos unit, if you did not have active like line of sight on it, then it would move faster. And if you did have line of sight on it with your units, then it wouldn't. Now, this doesn't mean like vision. It means a unit has to be staring at him, basically, which also is kind of hard to visualize, I think. So maybe that would also not work. But I like the idea of like a commander immediately like telling his units to form a circle or something and look out, or backs against each other. Like, keep your eyes fucking peeled. Don't blink, idiot. You'll die. So we'll have to see what actually works, how it actually gets worked in, but. Okay, we have flying in the face of Githrovan convention. Many Silithron combatants engage from close ranges. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, there'd be hallucination stuff for sure. Well, there's not going to be any randomness in the game. Obviously, that's not something if it's random, you can't account for skill, which is the whole point of the game, is that it's skill testing. So we can't have any RNG. We'll have RNG for like audio visual, or not. I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this without it sounding stupid. Obviously, some things like randomizing between races that you're playing as, or you're randomizing your player color or something, that'll be there, but that's just strictly visual stuff, or input RNG, where it's like it happens once and you can adapt to it later. But aura, for sure, like there's going to be plenty of aura stuff. I think a lot of the units for Kolopoazos and even for the Solar Throne are going to have that sort of mental health deterioration aura. It just kind of depends on what I would want out of that. Like, what effects does that have? I did think about things like forcing hostiles to commit suicide or something when they lose all of their mental health points, but I mean, it doesn't really extend logically to like robots and stuff that don't have that vector for attack open. And then it also doesn't. It also feels quite stupid. I guess is the operating word there. What's up, Lucy? One thing that I thought of, I guess I can throw into the Kolopoazo section, is madness is gathered from corpses by Kolopo, but it quickly deteriorates in quantity on unit death. So this would allow for basically like, even if the unit didn't die by a Kolopoazos combatant, it just like it was killed by something else, the madness would almost be like a pick upable resource by Kolopoids. So that'll be like how we counter that, I think. But we're slowly whittling down all of the ambiguous elements into explicit descriptions, which is nice because that'll make it a lot easier to actually design these things in game. So we have descriptions of, I mean, I guess we have everything here besides. I guess we could say. Well, I would imagine so, just because tech that harvests the stars like solar energy to the point where it's not just, I mean, it's blocking it from everything else, would actually, if they were using that star for nourishment, they would just get fucking annihilated. Like they would just die, starve. Um, that's probably one of the main reasons why they would vehemently oppose the Rosellium, is because the Rosellium are like deconstructing. They're not even like constructing solar shit. They're literally just taking stars apart. So it's a little bit, it's like very clearly like opposite. Because, so in a nutshell, the Githrovans want the universe to operate as close to its natural state as possible. And they view like warfare, and all of this stuff is like, they don't really view it as an extension of nature or downstream effect of nature insofar as it was part of the plan or as the natural state would occur. So they're trying to quiet the stars insofar as stop warfare from happening. And the Solar Throne was given a similar goal, or the same goal, really. It's just that the Githrovan are attempting to do it mostly through peace and only have to use their weapons of war, particularly their weapons of great power, in specific situations where the time calls for it. And that's why they value having like a good relationship with a lot of the different regencies out there. Obviously, some can't be negotiated with. Rosellium, Orlithray, Kolopoazos. You can talk with some of these factions, but by and large, you can't change their natures, right? The Orlithray are especially like, you can't even talk to them, so bye. Nadarasatha as well would be another faction that the Githrovans generally would hold in quite high amounts of contempt, because Nadarasatha specifically block light from entering their battlefields. That's actually how they ascend up the tech tree. So the more sort of smoke screens, if you will, that they're able to construct, the more of these pillars of blackness that they construct to get access to higher tiers of tech. That's like running counter to what the Githrovans want, and also what the Githrovans are. Like anybody who commits warfare or whatever is running counter to the Githrovan sort of method. But if you're also fucking with Sun, that's a good way to get their emotions against you, as well as their whatever they were going to do already. I mean, the thing about Rune is that they just like the fact they revel in glory of combat, not out of honor. Like they just want to say that they killed you, basically. So, Yeah, I think Rune entering into peace talks with anything would be really funny. They would have those like alliances of convenience because obviously they have the self-preservation of I want to live so that I can continue killing things. But it's not really about killing specifically; it's like conquering, subjugating. So it doesn't have to be driving their opponents to extinction necessarily. If they agree to like serve forever, okay, well, yeah, then you can come on because you're going to help me kill the next thing or conquer the next thing. So there's that element where some factions have been forced to do that. Yes, actually. So there's already plans to have them use the Anthelion, which is um, the gravitational power of. I mean, I think you might have seen the Anthelion before, but this is the Anthelion. So this is essentially a large part of this unit works on behalf of like solar energy or really energy taken from dead stars a lot. So yeah, uh, another way that the solar throne are capable of perverting the power uh, of a lot of that stuff in general. Pretty good. Will do the trick, I think. I'm also trying to get rid of the like as many adverbs in the writing as possible, which is mostly an exercise in your internal thesaurus. But I do find that a lot of the times when I'm using adverbs, it's not actually that I don't have a term that would work fine. Usually the term that the adverb is being applied to works fine actually. The issue is that I think I have this internal bias of like more words equals better. It's obviously not when you say that out loud, but my initial thought is I got to write a lot of words. But each word needs to actually mean something, so obviously if it's surplus to requirements, you can just cut it out. You know what would be really funny is if I made it so that demoralized opponents did less damage, but moved faster to be like, run, motherfucker. I don't actually know if I will do that, but I like the idea. I'm trying to think of like how to phrase what the demoralization would actually be and quantify it in something that would be interesting, but also not like a complete fuck you. But I just imagine like that would be kind of thematic actually. Is I'm losing damage, so which decreases the likelihood that I'll be able to win this fight. But I can run away farther. So something like that could be interesting. And obviously, the aura of demoralization would probably be some sort of stack building thing that would dissipate the farther away you get, or quicker. It would quicker, so it would unstack quicker the farther you were from the unit, to the point where if you were out of its sight range, you wouldn't get the stacks anymore, which means you would slow that back down, but you wouldn't. You would also start to lose out all of the stacks, and I think that makes sense. Maybe it wouldn't even be something that builds up in stacks, and instead it would be something that has like almost a, you know how explosive attacks or splash damage attacks have areas of effect where at their core they do is the max damage, and then as you radiate out from the center you take less damage. It would probably be like something like that where you just naturally have this scaling plus minus effect where it scales up to 100% of whatever its intended design is. When you reach maximum proximity to the unit or something. So if you have this like domineering walker or whatever, that's probably going to demoralize units in a wider radius. But something that's a little bit more on the low level, maybe it doesn't demoralize you at all. Maybe they have to be a certain size or whatever. Maybe that would work out in some way where there's still counterplay. Obviously, if you have longer range units and they have these lumbering short or mid-range units, you're going to be able to compete with them fairly well. Which is going to make an interesting element there, but only specific units will have this demoralized mechanic. So I don't think it would be something to the point where like one Regency would hard counter the Solar Throne just because they trend towards longer ranges or something. So. Yeah, there would definitely be some sort of shell shock. I don't know if it would be like, it probably wouldn't overlap with madness, but it would be more like straight up fear. I know that Warhammer 40K's Dawn of War 2 game, maybe other ones, had that like there was a morale meter as well as a health meter, but they also had squads and a bunch of shit that reduced interactivity. So I don't really think that that's the best way to handle that. Because it feels like it's because of it being a parallel system, right? It feels like it's something that might be out of your control, because when the meter fills up and it's kind of invisible, even though I'm sure specific things increase the meter, like suppressing fire from memory, maybe an explosion, maybe just losing squad members. I'm sure specific things are reducing that meter, but it feels invisible because there's not really good reads for it. And you don't even have precise control over your units because of squads. So, and not all units even have the morale meter. So it's like only organic squads do. And then even some of those probably don't have morale meters, like heroes or whatever. So like it was just really inconsistent as a mechanic. Whereas this sort of thing would be completely consistent across all units. So I guess there could be some sort of like aura of confidence boost or something that like makes units immune or reduces the impact or something. I don't know. Oh yeah, isn't that like the Imperial Guardsman thing? That was always funny. Is like it's basically beatings will continue until morale improves. The unit. That must be a meme. It's like, oh, if I don't get shot by my own commander for running away, I still stand a better chance if I can dodge his shot. I still stand a better chance of just running away from this fucking sight of sheer insanity. But I guess it was kind of a thematic ability, but it still felt like nah. But I mean, the Imperial Guardsmen being so poorly equipped all the time is what really staggers my fucking suspension of disbelief. I know that's probably a meme or something in the 40K community. But. I guess right now I'll go with attack speed decrease and movement speed increase. As opposed to damage decrease, because damage is a little bit of a different mechanic or a different system. Feels. I feel like that would create more inconsistency in players' minds than attack speed, but I'm not sure. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how they managed that one. It does make you go, hmm. Say attacking slower and there you go. All right, I feel like that's pretty good. It's a nice description of the playstyle and stuff. Also talks about Solar Kings. I was gonna do Titan, but it feels so boring to call something a Titan. I'm probably going to need to call something a Titan with how many fucking regencies I have. But Solar King also ties back into Solar Throne, so I like that better anyway. I was thinking maybe Solar Ruler, but that's too many syllables, dude. You gotta have 3 syllables instead. Down 3 posts. Yes, 2,000 unique names, but it's actually more than that. It's 2,000 plus, hold on, 40 times 20. It's 2,800 unique names, but it's actually more than that. It's, I'll say 1,800. Wait, what? I'll say it's probably about 1,800 units with weapons as a rough estimate. So it's actually 4,600 unique names. Oh, but wait. There's also upstarts, which are probably going to be like, I don't know. There's probably going to be like 30 unique upstarts with like 30 units. And 30 unique upstarts with like 25 combat units. That's 750 plus 900 plus 2,800 plus 1,800. It's actually 6,250 unique names, actually. Plus all the campaign names, but those don't count. Yeah, Solar Lord would be okay. I just think King is a more powerful phonetic term, like phonetically more powerful. I guess king also has like the gender stuff associated with it usually, but I don't really think that's that big of a deal here. People will enjoy the symbology. That's a bit more reasonable. Yeah, exactly. All right. Okay. That's probably fairly reasonable. It's conventional, so I don't really have to talk too much about the tech progression itself. But yeah, okay. Here we go. Slap this bad boy in there. There is one thing that I wanted to update though, which was the idea of the main sort of like the higher consciousness. Mucking about with the religious zeal aspect, but I'll probably work that in later on. Yeah. All right. Here we go. Boom. IMO. Now that is funny. Right, let's head over to the Githrovan. Dude, look at these guys. They're puny by comparison. We got to fix this. Well, I will be right back. I have to use the bathroom, get some water. When I come back, we'll fix up the Githrovan, and we'll probably do some other faction. I don't know what yet. I'm back. I think my dog snuck into my room or something. He's gone now. Owned. Where am I going with this? Right, so this intro paragraph is a bit light, but I think it does introduce them well enough. The commencement talks about their main let's see. Yeah, okay. I think the first two paragraphs here are pretty Sensible. This one here is a little bit... this could actually be like the lead into our wrap-up, probably. And then so we can write wrap up here, so we know what we're doing there. This is where we start talking about their gameplay. Mastery of powerful arsenal. A mastery of a powerful arsenal. Yeah, this I think this is a reasonable this is a reasonable thing to talk about their disgust, if you will, for the massive weapons of war that they have. But that's basically like covering the last element of the tech tree, so I think it's fine to leave that as like right before we lead back into the wrap up. Here we have let's see, psychic. Okay. I do need to talk about their appearance at some point, but that doesn't need to be right now. The trouble is that, so I like the idea, but we would need to come up with their own names for solar, like different sets of stars or different cosmology. So with Githrovan specific names for cosmology, well, let's say cosmic bodies, specifically stars. Could inform the naming conventions of their units. So we could just say that, like, it doesn't have to just be their psychic specialists, but I think that makes a lot of sense, actually. We would just come up with their own stuff, and I don't know how we would bridge the gap in terms of, like, we would probably just refer to whatever the so for example, like something like a red giant or a white dwarf or whatever. That stuff could very easily be something like, I mean, you just came up with Crimson Giant as an example, but it could be something like the, I don't know what you would use instead of giant. Maybe actually they call them kings or rulers or lords or something as well. I mean, they do revere them, so they might even refer to them as gods or something similar to the word god. But I like the idea of the like syncing that in terms of a naming convention. I think there's a lot of really natural naming conventions that will spring up around a lot of these themes because so many of the different regencies have entirely unique elements to their lore. So like you could imagine a lot of like very sharp, harsh monosyllabic, I always fuck up that word. Monosyllabic words would be really useful for the rune, for example, because they're like straight to the point. They're these fucking barbarian type creatures. I imagine short, punchy words would also be used for Keltar, but they wouldn't need to be monosyllabic. How do you even fucking pronounce that? Seriously. Monosyllabic. Okay. Monosyllabic is fine. But yeah, you get the idea. I think a lot of that stuff can be very easily inferred by the lore, the backing lore, or whatever. Was it about strange matter? I've watched a ton of videos about stuff like this. A lot of it is very theoretical. Like they really don't know what's going on and they're just assuming that maybe some of this stuff can happen. But I like the idea of building that as part of my like theoretically possible list of things. And then I just take from that and use it for sci-fi stuff. Yeah. Yeah, some of that shit is really wild to think about. I could definitely imagine using that as a basis for like a tech branch inside something like maybe the Nadarasatha or the Thruk. Hey, that could be interesting. If there was like a strange Thruk, you know what I mean? Yeah, exactly, Shirk. But you could imagine like the Thruck are probably gonna. I didn't actually mention this about the Thruck. I don't think it's a single worker internal construction. I don't think that will be the case. I think the Thruck are actually going to call down additional uh, structures from the sky as asteroids. It'll be kind of ambiguous as to how they signal that, but I imagine it would be like using the resources that the structure costs as a lure or an enticement for the other organisms to to deploy, basically. So wherever the Thruck go, they would essentially have this strip of land or in orbit that would break apart. Perhaps that would be one way of going about doing it. Maybe instead of falling in from asteroids, although that is quite thematic for seeding a planet of Thruck, they might just emerge from the terrain, which would probably be a little bit more thematic for like. There's a couple of different ways I could go with that anyway, but I like the idea of the Earth at the target site just being immediately terraformed, and in that sense, yeah, exactly. But yeah, I imagine something like a strange Thruck, in this sense, being able to convert corpses to more forms of it or something. But I also have to see the value in having that be a sort of like extraction from stars, like neutron stars being mined by the solar throne for this purpose, weaponized. It would be really funny if the reason why the unit was so expensive is that it actually had, or it would have a timed life, I guess, where eventually it would explode or collapse in on itself just from its internal, like, containing, or its internal containment being converted to strange matter, and it would become unstable or whatever. And then at that point, there would probably be some mystical, futuristic built-in failsafe to erase the matter from existence before it converted the whole planet, the battlefield that it was on, into strange matter. But yeah, neutron plague sounds pretty fucking banging. We'll call it that actually. Neutron plague, strange matter. That could be pretty banging. IMO. Dude, that's not a bad idea though. Think about it, Shirk. Think about all the different ways the universe could end. There is that tunneling into a lower energy state. If you guys are familiar with that theory, it's been explained as a bowling ball falling down to a cliff, like down a mountain, and it stops on a ledge but gets dislodged somehow and keeps rolling. And if we're at the point where it's at the ledge, teetering over, and it does fall, then like the entire galaxy or the entire universe would just be eradicated at the speed of light from all sides, presumably. So, well, yeah, universal ends are way more boring, unfortunately. But I like the idea of like a localized region of lower energy state tunneling. That could be like a Psychoran super weapon type thing, or maybe some other regency that hasn't yet been conceived of would have some capacity to do that. Just being able to, yeah, vacuum decay. Oh, okay, that's what you were referencing earlier. Yeah. Well, you just imagine like that shit would. I don't know how you would work that in from a gameplay standpoint, but that would be pretty powerful, obviously. So. It might be like a generator that does it to itself as well, and so it basically has a self-contained way of obliterating. Yeah. Pretty good. Pretty powerful. If you could actually control that. You know what was really funny to me is that the scientists that were responsible, some of the scientists responsible for the Manhattan Project, thought that maybe it was possible that an atomic chain reaction would occur when you set off one atomic bomb, and it would just obliterate the entire planet. There was like credible theories that some significantly larger quantities of destruction could happen if you did that, and they still tested it anyway. Some balls on those men. Now, here's the scary thought. I guess in the real universe or in Xibalba as well. What if somebody actually did unleash a cosmic level, like universal and universe-ending thing? I mean, it's not like you can get a warning out, but if it's spreading at the speed of light, it would take a long time to actually reach from like one corner of the universe to all other parts of it. So that could be pretty funny if that technically happened like thousands of years ago, and it'll take another couple million to finish. Can you imagine? Okay, so we've touched a little bit on their mystics. It would be more of a go to sleep call, to be honest. I kind of like the idea of like black holes spontaneously decaying or some shit. There was some really weird theory that I didn't really grasp, where it was something like it was some weird thing like it was possible that like a very powerful omniscient artificial intelligence or a supreme being could have manifested into existence randomly and done so in a complete void, and as a result may have chosen to simulate other realities, one of which we may be in, so that it could avoid being lonely or some shit. Like, I'm probably misconstruing some aspect of it and unwittingly strawmanning it, but it just seemed very weird that it seemed like real life fan fiction. It's physics fan fiction. And I was very confused as to what the fuck was going on with that thought process. But if you make it a little bit less like, oh yes, everything could be simulated by some higher entity or whatever, and just think about the idea of like cosmic entities trying to avoid boredom. That is kind of what the Colapazos are. So yeah, basically Shamble Man. I will say more conventional infantry done. Durable combat armor. Oh, I was saying that the theory that was being again, I don't really know what the fuck it is, but there was some theory that a super creature entity, a higher being, could suddenly manifest in some void, some void of a universe, and instead of existing in the void, it would choose to simulate realities, so that it would not be bored. And I thought that I don't. Again, I'm probably misrepresenting it in some way, where there was something that made that all make sense. But to me, it made no fucking sense. And I was very confused as to why they thought something could magically, something that complex could magically manifest. But I guess that's probably what I missed, is why they thought something like that could happen in the first place. Because if you existed in a void and had the ability to um, generate reality, then yeah, you would actually do that, obviously. But like, I can understand that premise. You want to avoid a void because you're not Blizzard. But I can't really understand just how you would come into existence in the first place. Yeah. I guess every time somebody beats Legacy of the Void's epilogue into the void, then another supernatural deity emerges in some multiverse and begins creating a reality where Blizzard doesn't exist to atone for the sins of that company. I think that's how it works. That's my physics fan fiction. In the beginning, man created God. I remember being a very edgy, militant anti-theist when I was like a teenager. Although I did have one funny bit that I still think is funny, where somebody on Facebook shared some image. This is back when I was on Facebook, so you know this is ages ago. Somebody on Facebook shared an image of like, it was like, when you feel like when you feel down, there's always some like, remember that uh God has a plan or whatever. And then I replaced has a plan with I took the same image and just like painted out the background of the text that I was trying to replace, and then replaced it with obviously different text. like different font that just said like instead it said God, it ended in God, and then it said actually doesn't exist, haha. And that's just absurd the way that I fucking did it. Like the composition of the image is really what sells that. I still think that was pretty funny. Unsurprisingly, the person who I responded to did not think it was very funny. Edgy things atheists used to say online prior to 2010. I don't know. You'd have to go back and look at some really old Amazing Atheist videos. Probably. I used to just say like, I don't know actually. I just used to get into like just to like not really arguments because they weren't constructed, but I would just like yell at people basically. So I don't really know. I would make it very obvious that I thought if you believed in God you were dumb, basically. That's what I was doing. And now I don't really think like a lot of things have changed over the years. But I guess I just think everybody's kind of dumb, including myself, in very different ways, in very different contexts. And believing in God is just one context where you could be dumb. So, yeah, where is your sky daddy now? That is true. That is something that people did say. They would even put that on like one of those demotivational posters. Do you guys remember demotivational posters? Now that is just boomer things right there. I really felt like a boomer when I was remembering using the Oblivion hack tool in Brood War 116.1 to set my download number in lobbies to 69. I remember feeling quite confident that I was epic doing that. That's why I titled one of my castover videos /DL69. This is a callback to simpler times. Okay, I will say I never thought that those cat things or the cheeseburger meme was funny. I always thought it was stupid. I actually had a very strong aversion to anything that was like where it was a deliberate misspelling and that was what was supposed to be funny. I always thought that was stupid. But that actually has been a pretty consistent trend if you think about it. Like I think the most recent one that I'm aware of is that Amogus instead of Among Us is like Amogus. Like that's the most recent one. But then before that there's like Spoderman and shit. I never thought that any of that shit was funny. I always thought it was just like you basically are you're advertising stupidity basically. Yeah, Oblivion was a name spoofer. Rangers 3. Thankfully, it doesn't really matter what cosmic entities are out there because most of you guys are probably not going to live forever like I am, so. Only I have to worry about this stuff. And even then, I only have to worry about it millennia from now. TBH. I think I've done all of the tech stuff. I didn't talk about their tech requirements, though. Okay. How do you know that's not already happened, Shirk? You really are putting a new meaning to brain in a vat. Okay, so now we talked a bit about their tech stuff. We'll hit up their construction, tech stuff, tech tier progression stuff, and a bit of their play style. Glad I looked back at that message. I actually still remember, Shirk, that it was probably one of the most memorable moments of playing CSGO during Fraud Nights. I'm not just talking about above you with the Negev. I'm also talking about there was a death match or casual match we were in where there were some European fucking squeakers or something. It's like where that old U guy came from, but he wasn't talking, so I actually don't know what the fuck that guy was. There's some other guy who was like talking and being quite irritating. And before I could even say anything, you just came on the microphone and said, "I will beat you to death." And that really got me, man. That fucking that will forever be burned in my brain. What a moment in history. I don't think the guy understood you though, because I don't think he spoke English. I hope to find that moment someday in my stream clip hunting. But it's quite old now. I found out I can't actually save new videos from old videos. I can only seem to do that if they're within like a month from. Maybe it's like after some specific feature or something, but I don't know. It seems really weird. I couldn't. I was trying to clip the. There was something that I did where I was doing a reaction to the Age of Empires 4 trailer, and I wanted to clip that part of the stream for obvious reasons. So that I could upload it as a separate video, but I couldn't do it with the YouTube system, which means I have to either screen record or download the entire video and edit it. Yes, simple and direct indeed. What is Hotel Trivago anyway? I've seen that around a few places. You would like the mod. There's a gun called the Slaughterhouse. The Slaughterhouse is a gun. I'll find it in my videos. Here you go. Hold on. I have to mute my music for this. All right, here we go. Check out my Slaughterhouse. Pretty epic. IMO. I did. I made an underlined U with a little winkly tail at the end. Jesus Christ. Don't know what happened there. I'm glad I literally titled a video dog crap and it still got a copyright claim. Bunch of jokers. Okay, we need to wrap this up because I gotta leave. But let's finish this one up. We talked about self-construction. We talked about the tier limits. We haven't talked about the tier limits yet. That's one thing that I have to do. With structures, teleporting in faster. What's up, Heisenberg585? Thanks for the crow, dude. Hope you're doing well. Teleporting in faster when nearby power fields. I guess we can just say when built within or placed within power fields. So this is basically a flip on the Protoss warp-in mechanic. It's a little bit more involved. You can warp in anywhere, but you have reduced build speed if you're not within a power radius, power field. And also your structures themselves have reduced building efficiency if they don't have a power field nearby. However, it will be possible to supercharge structures. I don't know exactly how that will work. I imagine it will just be excess power generated by power fields, but I'm not 100% sure what that will look like. Will it be enough to warp in another power field? I actually think that the power field structures themselves, they might not even be tier 1 structures, which will be kind of interesting for their openers. Or if they are, they might be kind of expensive in terms of the amount of build space they occupy, which is going to bias the Regency towards claiming large areas of production space, basically. And then that way there will be a natural limitation on how many you can put next to each other to improve the efficiency of specific structures, where you could go what most people will go, where they build like a couple of them, like the old Protoss style was to build like, you know, a pylon here on one side of the grid and then like a bunch of gateways down until you ran out of space, and then you get another pylon to get more gateways. This way, you might be able to build like a ton of like big pylons, whatever they end up being called, where you're actually having like you're surrounding individual production structures with them or something. That could be kind of interesting, especially for like air production structures where you can actually fully surround it. That would be pretty cool, I think. That would be one way to supercharge individual production structures to a point where they would just get super fast scaling stuff. But yeah, don't know how that will work. It's an interesting idea. We'll say biases, base selections towards expansive. Okay, so we talked a little bit about how that affects their playstyle. This is ameliorated by Acquiring. By their vast arsenal. Okay, so that kind of describes the fact that there's no tech tier requirements. Now we jump into the wrap up. This is where we can talk a bit more about their their relations between the Githrovan and the other regencies. I actually think we've basically written that already, which is where we talk about it here. And then we can just merge this over here. Okay, I think that should be fine. I might rewrite that last sentence, but it's a good starter. Good place to end for now. Slap this up on the website. Verify that it is indeed epic. Interestingly enough, I was originally going to make the Solar Throne require the power fields, but elected to not do that and instead put it on the Githrovan. I think I was originally doing that because I didn't want the Githrovan to be seen as such a I wanted to have some more stuff that sets them apart from Protoss, but I think a significantly modified version of the Protoss style is sufficient for that, most likely. Okay. Here's some stuff that we still need to do. We'll say appearance. We need to update their appearance a bit more, or talk about their appearance. And I guess for now we'll just leave it at that. I don't know what else is required yet. Update Githrovan. Right. I still need to spell check this whole document. Oh well. All right. Well, let's reflect on what we've been able to accomplish today. We did do the Githrovan update and the Solar Throne update. We actually did those in inverse order. And we also glossary update, specifically construction styles, tech progression styles. So up next, we want to update the Dreamhold game flow a bit more. I'm going to put this on to do, though, because I actually don't know when I'm going to be doing this exactly. And we still have plenty of other regencies to update and continue working on. But pretty soon, we're going to need to get to cross the Rubicon of starting to develop individual units. So start individual unit concepts. However, this is probably further down the list from... we'll say start, I guess, expand on developed branches for each regency. Because I've started this with certain regencies, but I haven't done all of them. The mackerel DOS are an example of a regency that has it, where it talks about the dichotomy between tech tree branches. And then explains what each one of them are. So we're going to have stuff like that for all regencies, although I'm going to have to investigate how exactly I'm going to show that. But it'll basically be somewhat similar to, like, eventually you'll jump into a page that looks like this for Terrans, for example. There will be a version of this for each regency that will have the different branches, as well as maybe some more information on, obviously you'll be able to click on the units and stuff the same exact way. I'm not 100% sure if there's any other information that I'll throw in here, but there will be a tech tree map for each regency eventually. First, I'm going to start with the fundamental components of one of those tech tree maps, which is obviously stuff like figuring out the... So one obvious way would be like, okay, well, I need to know how many tiers there are. There's going to be an average of 10. I imagine just everything will be 10. But then I need to determine, like, putting to paper some concept of how the tiers are separated, and maybe writing a little bit of information about each tier, what each tier is going to mean in terms of an improvement. The hardest one, of course, is going to be defining the first tier. What is the first tier all about? What technology do they have access to at the first tier? What is the limitation? We're assuming that based on the average of 100 units, each tier will average out to be 10 units. And this will include workers and non-combatants. But for the most part, we'll be dealing with, like, if I had to guess, an average of 8 combat units, 1 specialist that's a non-combatant, because obviously combat units can also be specialists, but 1 weaponless unit and 1 worker, which technically is a combatant in the sense that it has a weapon, but not a primary use for it. So that would probably be the average. I guess we could even mention that in the Regency section. We can say, like, what would we put here anyway? We would say, I guess I'll put this in Scratchpad. We'll say, branch. So we would have branch, so the tech tree map outline would be something like extents of power at tier 1. Description of how each tier adds to it. I guess we could say summary. The arsenal. Presumed averages of. We would say 10 total units per tier. Unit. I guess we would just say utility units here. Okay. That's just some of the ideas that I had just now. Okay. That will do it for today. Tomorrow, let's write out our plan, I suppose. Definitely do this. And then I guess we'll start consider branch tick tree map logic. Okay, that will do it. And I will not be doing that particular part on stream. Tomorrow I am going to be streaming, but it'll be Fraud Night. And I suppose I'll be doing some of this on Sunday. So see me Sunday for another one of these streams. That's in 2 days. Don't know when. Could be late like today or early like it has been the other days. Or somewhere in the middle. Who knows? But, as always, if you have some impressions or some thoughts that you want to share, and it happens to not be during this stream, post it in the Discord server. We're there all the time. And I'll see you boys later. Bye-bye.